Good evening and welcome to the very first edition of Culture Wheels, a soon-to-be weekly series that examines trends, developments, and challenges in the cultural sector. I'm your host, Kelly Krause, and tonight I'm going to be opening that can of worms. Yes, it's the illegal antiquities trade, but I'm going to be specifically looking at its relationship to IS, otherwise known as the Islamic State. And while I typically try to avoid drawing more attention to the Islamic State than they are already getting, I feel it's time to really examine the state's relationship with the antiquities trade, especially after the most recent outcry against its destruction at the Mosul Museum in Iraq just last week. Now, it goes without saying that many people are looking for a solution to effectively end the operations and activities of IS, and this most recent attack on Iraqi heritage has only escalated that desire and need to find a resolution ASAP. But I actually believe that it is cultural heritage, and within the broader MENA region specifically, that can potentially contribute to a broader resolution. While IS blatantly destroys anything it deems as idolatrous, typically anything in human form, the illegal antiquities trade still serves as a primary source of funding for the Islamic State, estimated to be second only to oil, with a significant 20% of all profits going towards lining the state's pockets. And that's from a huge, wide-ranging network of looters and smugglers and go-betweens, dealers and collectors. Now, in a market where many items have the potential to sell for up to $1 million US, that's an absolutely staggering amount of financial support pouring into IS. It's stupid money. Just stupid. So, theoretically and simply put, if you can bring down the antiquities trade, then you can bring down IS. Or at least make a significant dent into its finances and disrupt its broader networks. The reality, however, is that this is actually extremely difficult to do. National and international agencies have been trying to crack down on the illegal antiquities trade for decades. And it's especially difficult when the illegal trade maintains a flourishing demand alongside a more than ready and willing supply chain. When all is said and done, we still face dilemmas that new policies simply do not address or adequately resolve, not least of which are the greater social challenges in origin countries. I'm talking about feelings of disenfranchisement at archaeological sites, political instability, lack of resources and opportunities that allow for socioeconomic development at the local level. By and large, the primary stimulus for the looting and illegal trade of antiquities. But this doesn't mean that the provisions to limit the incentives for looters or restrictions on new sales are not needed. Instead, it may be a matter of how those provisions and restrictions are approached and enforced. Maybe governments could follow the example of Japan, assigning grades to objects that either deem them as national works of art, prohibited from export, or as common objects, with the opportunity to serve as any given culture's authentic ambassadors. Minor pieces sold by governments and institutions can then be used to fund restoration, exhibition, and protection of cultural sites and objects, or even fund local development programs. Similarly, the United Kingdom's Portable Antiquities Scheme and its Treasure Act each serve to record small finds of archaeological interest found by members of the public, who can legally sell those items to a museum at a price agreed upon by an independent board of antiquities experts. Now, it's worth noting that many previously unknown archaeological sites have been identified through all these government plans, and they have contributed greatly to the level of knowledge about the past, as well as to the household incomes of participating members of the public. Moreover, they have contributed and continue to contribute to the thought and relationships between archaeologists and local populations, who often find themselves on opposite ends and treating each other with disdain and mistrust. But what about the demand side of the issue? Collectors. Ooh. Well, collectors could also organize along interest lines and pool their resources to either buy directly from government institutions or fund cultural heritage initiatives, actually working on the ground with archaeologists and with local populations to build museums, host symposia and other educational events, fund research centers, preservation, community development projects, site security. I mean, the possibilities are endless. The pride these collectors feel in owning a part of the past could then come from directly participating with it in a positive and, more importantly, a transparent way that is open to all audiences. Regardless, there are endless legitimate issues on all sides of the provenance and patrimony conundrum. So, why does there have to be a single, simplistic, unilateral solution? The better questions to ask would be how the demand in the illicit antiquities trade should be approached and reevaluated. How do we get collectors to divert their money from the big, often illegal market to funding preservation, archaeology, conservation, and especially education and local development instead? How do we replace the economic incentive for looting at the ground level with the economic incentive of building museums, funding local archaeology, and finding sustainable ways to capitalize on local and regional heritage? And in the case of IS especially, how do we as security or heritage and antiquities experts work with local populations to not only disrupt the supply to IS, but contribute to the long-term growth and stability of local economies? There are clearly important questions that need to be asked and answered before we begin to tackle the issue of what to do with IS, the antiquities trade, or the protection of cultural property. But something we can all do is lay the groundwork for further discourse and collaboration. Well, that about wraps it up here for me. Please note that the opinions expressed here are my own, and I welcome your own thoughts and ideas on the IS Antiquities conundrum. Simply post your comments below. And if you think there's something specific in the cultural sector we should be discussing here at Cultural Wheels, let us know, and we'll do our best to share it with our audiences. For now, thanks for watching, and keep that cultural sector in motion.